Yes, folks, part 2. Let's break down the sleep cycle. In order for us to really buy in and understand some of the recommendations that I will go through in part 3, we first have to understand what's going on when we put our head on that pillow at night until we wake up in the morning. Because with that understanding, it makes a whole bunch of sense why we're recommending the components that we are. So let's break down sleep. If you can just stay with me here, there's a little bit of sciencey stuff, but it's not too complicated at all. And it's a really simplified explanation of sleep. You can then go ahead and apply the recommendations that I give you in part 3 with great confidence. So let's talk about a night's sleep. Okay, now you're going to hear these recommendations. Make sure that you get 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep every night. Set up the environment so it's cool and dark. Let's talk about quality of sleep as much as quantity of sleep. And all those things are true and valuable. But let's dig a little deeper and let's actually understand what's going on. So in every night of sleep, you can expect to go through 4 to 7 what they call cycles of sleep. And each one of these cycles lasts somewhere between 70 minutes and 120 minutes. So just over an hour up to 2 hours. Each one of the cycles. And you're going to go through 4, 5, 6, 7 of them over the course of a night. Now, earlier in the night, so when you first go to bed and over the first 2 or 3 hours, these cycles tend to be a little bit shorter. And as the night progresses, the cycles tend to get longer in duration. So that's what's occurring. And each one of these cycles is made up of 4 stages of sleep. And every one of these stages within each cycle plays an important role in you yielding performance benefits and quality of sleep. And so we need to understand the stages of sleep and what their role is relative to you being your best, either as an athlete or just in life, globally. And so let's go through the 4 stages. Very simple. Number 1 is N1. It's a very short phase. It's a transitional phase. Number 2 is called N2, revolutionary, and that's light sleep. Number 3 is N3, deep sleep. Now we're going to flag this. This is a really important phase or stage of a sleep cycle. Very important stage. We're going to dig into that in a couple of moments. And then finally, the 4th is N. No, it's not N. It's called REM. Yes, you've heard of that before. Another key flag, another critical component, and we're going to focus our attention a lot on that as well. So the 2 real pillars of high quality sleep are deep sleep and REM. So let's have a few words on each of these stages. So let's go back to the top, N1. This is your shortest stage of sleep. It lasts really just a few minutes, somewhere between 3, 4, 5 minutes up to about 10 minutes. And this is really the phase where you're just falling asleep. You start to get to that very drowsy, lucid phase. It's transitional between you being awake and asleep. It also, at the end of one cycle of sleep, is the transitional phase between the end of REM, so that's our 4th stage of the cycle, and the return to the following cycle. So you want to think about this as a transitional phase. In N1, there's not really any deep rejuvenation occurring. And in fact, if you need to get up and go for a pee in the middle of the night, you're typically going to wake up during N1. And so what that means, by the way, just a little tangentially, is that if you have to get up at night and you naturally wake up once or twice to go for a pee, you're probably in N1 sleep. So that doesn't mean that it's compromising your sleep quality at all, because you're in this natural up phase and you're transitioning. So if you get up, you go to the bathroom, go back to bed and fall asleep relatively quickly and stay calm. Don't make it big an emotional thing. You don't need to overstress. It's not going to interrupt the quality of your sleep over the course of the arc of your 6, 7, 8, 9 hours that you're asleep. So that's N1. Okay, that's an important phase, transitional mostly. Then you go to N2. That's a light sleep. Now, in any given night, we're going to have a pretty high ratio of total sleep being N2, light sleep. And it really isn't discussed that much as a part of sleep, but it still plays an important role. Because during light sleep, the body is really starting to transition into a relaxed state. This is the phase that your muscles start to really relax. You quite often might twitch a little bit here. And it's really a preparatory phase, a little bit like off-season, you could say, for deep sleep and REM sleep. So those stages that are coming up towards the back end of the cycle. Alrighty. Now within light sleep as well, you're also doing some processing. You're starting to embed some memories. You're starting to ingrain some learning that's going on. You're starting to have a little bit of creativity going on in there. So there is some rejuvenation occurring in some important processes. But mostly it's a transitional phase. You want to think about this as paving the way for the next phase, which, as we'll learn, is a really important phase. And that's N3. This is deep sleep. So why am I flagging deep sleep as being so important? Well, that's because deep sleep is where all of your growth, repair, and rejuvenation occurs. This is the hotbed of physiological adaptations. So if you're applying stress in the day via training, this is where your adaptations to help you make you fitter, stronger, more powerful are occurring. So if you're listening as an athlete here, that deep sleep, that's your treasure trove right there, because you're getting muscle repair, physiological adaptations. They're all occurring during deep sleep. So we really care about that part. But also in a broader perspective of performance, we're delivering or developing their overall systemic rejuvenation. This is where you're rebuilding and getting a really robust immune system. That's occurring in deep sleep. And it is a critical piece of sleep for developing an overall robust platform of health and energy for the following days. So deep sleep is that growth, repair, adaptations. I think you've got it. Now a little bit more on deep sleep here. For all of us, it doesn't matter whether you tend to be a night owl or a morning lark. For all human beings, assuming that you're adjusted to the time zone that you're on, deep sleep tends to occur between about 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. If you wear any wearable, any tracker at all, you're going to see deep sleep occurring 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, but very, very little, if any at all, after about 2 a.m. It's the same for all of us. And that's a really important component so far as the implications when it comes to our habits and practices. And we're going to dig into them. But remember that deep sleep occurs between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. That's a good rule of thumb that you can live by. And what does that mean, by the way? Well, if you end up going to bed at midnight, and then you're halving your potential for deep sleep, even if you stay in bed for 8 hours. You want to think about that when we start getting into recommendations. So that's our third phase, N3, deep sleep. We then enter our final stage, REM, rapid eye movement. Now, we've all heard of REM, and it's not just the band from Athens, Georgia. This is a critical phase of sleep. And it is, as we suggest, the phase of dreaming. In fact, the best way to think about REM is this is where you're processing stress and anxiety. Throughout the day, from all different sources, we accumulate cortisol and stress hormones. And REM is the stage of sleep where we process most of this stress. And what that means is it has huge implications for stress reduction, mood, cognitive function, and much, much more. So beyond the growth and repair of deep sleep, we really care about REM. And here's a couple of things that are important when we consider a night of sleep. As your night of sleep extends into the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th hour, and then each cycle of sleep, the length of the REM stage starts to increase. In other words, when you first fall asleep, the first cycle or two, your REM stage might make up just 10, 15 minutes of that cycle. But by the end, in your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th cycle of sleep, you might start to get 30, 40, 50, up to 60 minutes of REM. And of course, the longer the piece of REM, the more stress processing that you care about. So let's think about that. Think about that. We've got 2 key components, deep sleep and REM. Deep sleep, growth, repair, adaptations. REM, occurring more and more and more the longer that you sleep, stress processing, cognitive function, information processing, ability to process. It's a bit more complicated than that, but this is a really simplified way of approaching sleep and starting to analyze whether you're getting good quality sleep. So with that information, now what we're equipped to do is dig into some recommendations of tips of how you can try and optimize the quality of your sleep by just simple practices and habits. That's going to be in part 3.